A caveman wakes up one winter morning. He walks to the edge of his territory and sees smoke rising from the neighboring cave system. The neighboring tribe's chief is gone. Hunters from the strongest tribe in the valley came in the night with fire and took him. The strongest tribe's chief says the neighboring chief was selling bad berries that poison minds. But the neighboring cave sits on the largest pool of black liquid in the entire valley. 300 billion stones worth of black liquid. The strongest tribe says they will run that cave now. They say they need to protect everyone from poison berries. But their own shaman admitted most poison berries come from a different direction entirely. And when you ask for proof that those fishing boats they destroyed last autumn actually carried poison berries, you get silence. The strongest tribe now has their warriors surrounding that cave, and they have made it very clear what they want. It was never about the berries. This is about the biggest resource grab you will see in your lifetime. And most people are missing it because they are focused on the story about drugs when the actual story is about control of 300 billion barrels of oil. I am going to walk you through exactly how this operation unfolded, why the official story does not match the evidence, and what this means for every single person watching. Because this is not just about Venezuela. This is about a precedent, and that precedent affects you. Let me set up the basic system first using one simple metaphor that will make this entire situation clear. Imagine a cave tribe that controls the biggest meat storage in the valley. We are talking about stores that could feed the entire region for generations. But this tribe has a chief that the strongest tribe in the valley does not like. The strongest tribe has better weapons, more warriors, and they have been eyeing that meat storage for years. For a long time, they just put up barriers. They said you cannot trade your meat with anyone unless we approve it. They froze the neighboring chief's trading stones. They made it very difficult for that tribe to sell their meat to anyone. And the meat just sat there, piling up, getting older, while the tribe that owned it got weaker and weaker because they could not trade it properly. Now, the strongest tribe needs a reason to go in and take control. You cannot just walk into another tribe's territory and take their resources without some kind of justification. So you need a story. You need something that makes your tribe look like the protector, not the aggressor. And that story was drugs. Specifically, the strongest tribe started saying that boats coming from the neighboring territory were carrying poisoned berries, fentanyl, and cocaine. Substances that genuinely do destroy communities in the strongest tribe's territory. That part is real. The crisis is real. But here is where it gets interesting. Starting in September of 2025, the strongest tribe began destroying boats in the water. Small wooden fishing vessels. They used overwhelming force, missiles, aircraft. The videos were shocking. These were not military boats. These were boats that could barely outrun a swimming beaver. And the strongest tribe destroyed at least 32 of them. At least 115 people died in these strikes. But when you ask for evidence that these specific boats were actually carrying drugs, you get nothing. No public proof, no cargo manifests. No photographs of seized substances, just claims. The strongest tribe's own intelligence agencies later admitted there was no solid evidence linking those boats to drug trafficking. And even if some boats were carrying drugs, Venezuela is not even a major source of the drugs flowing into the strongest tribe's territory. Most fentanyl comes through a completely different border. Most cocaine comes from a different neighboring tribe entirely. So if this was really about stopping drugs, you would expect the strongest tribe to focus their effort where the drugs actually come from. But they did not. They focused on Venezuela, the tribe with the oil. Let me show you the 4 escalations that make this pattern impossible to ignore. First, escalation. The strongest tribe starts with the boats. 32 strikes, over 100 dead, no evidence presented, but each strike sends a message. We can hit you whenever we want. And you cannot stop us. This builds the narrative that the neighboring tribe is dangerous, that they are trafficking poison. It sets the stage. But more importantly, it sets a precedent. If you can blow up boats in international waters without providing evidence, you have normalized unilateral military action. You have moved the line. Second escalation. The strongest tribe moves from boats to tankers. In December of 2025, they started seizing oil tankers carrying crude from the neighboring tribe. Not suspected drug boats, oil tankers. These are massive ships carrying the one resource that the neighboring tribe can still sell: The strongest tribe's Coast Guard boarded these tankers using special forces. They took them, and again, the justification was vague. They claimed the tankers were part of an illicit network, but taking another tribe's oil tankers is not counter-narcotics work. That is economic warfare. It is a blockade. It squeezes the neighboring tribe's ability to generate revenue, it weakens them, and it makes it harder for them to function as an independent entity. If you cannot sell your oil, you cannot feed your people. You cannot keep the lights on. You become desperate. Third escalation. In late December, the strongest tribe hit a port facility inside the neighboring tribe's actual territory. Not a boat in the water, not a tanker on the move, a land target inside their borders. The strongest tribe said the port was used by drug traffickers. Maybe it was. But hitting infrastructure inside another tribe's territory is an act of war, not law enforcement. War. And at this point, the strongest tribe had moved aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, and over 13,000 personnel into the waters around the neighboring tribe. This was not a police operation. This was an invasion force. Fourth escalation. On January 3rd, 2026, the strongest tribe launched a full military operation. They disabled the neighboring tribe's air defenses. They turned off the power in the capital. They sent helicopters into the heart of the neighboring chief's compound at 2 in the morning. They took the chief and his wife, put them on a warship, flew them to a different territory entirely. And the leader of the strongest tribe stood in front of his cave and said this was one of the most stunning displays of military power in history. He also said the strongest tribe would now run the neighboring tribe until a new leader was chosen. Not a leader chosen by the neighboring tribe's people, a leader chosen by the strongest tribe. And here is the kicker. When the strongest tribe's leader held his press conference, he did not talk about drugs for very long. He talked about oil. He said the neighboring tribe had stolen oil from the strongest tribe's companies. He referenced events from 1976 and 2007 when the neighboring tribe nationalized their oil industry, took it back from foreign control. And the strongest tribe's leader said that was theft. He said the strongest tribe would now take control of those oil reserves and invite the strongest tribe's own companies to come in and rebuild the oil industry. He said it directly, no metaphor, no subtext. Oil. Let me give you one concrete example to show you how this plays out in practice. The neighboring tribe has 300 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, the largest in the world, larger than Saudi Arabia, larger than Iraq, larger than anyone. Most of it is heavy crude, which is expensive to extract and requires specialized infrastructure, but it is still worth an unimaginable amount. At $50 per barrel, which is below current market rates, that is $15 trillion worth of oil. Even if only a third of it is economically viable to extract, you are still talking about $5 trillion. That is more than the annual economic output of most tribes in the valley. And for years, the strongest tribes' companies have been locked out of that resource because of sanctions and political disagreements. The neighboring tribe nationalized their oil. The strongest tribe did not like that, so they imposed sanctions. Those sanctions made it nearly impossible for the neighboring tribe to develop their oil or sell it at full value. The oil just sat there, trapped. And now, after months of military buildup, after boat strikes and tanker seizures and port bombings and finally a full invasion, the strongest tribe's leader says they will run the neighboring tribe and control the oil. The strongest tribe's own stock market reacted immediately. Shares of oil companies that operate in regions with heavy crude shot up. Companies that provide oil-field services saw their stock prices jump. Bonds issued by the neighboring tribe's government, which had been in default since 2017, surged by 30% in one day. The market understood what this was about instantly. It was not about drugs. It was about access to oil. It was about removing a leader who would not cooperate and installing someone who would. You might be thinking, okay, but the neighboring chief was bad. He rigged elections, his government was corrupt, people suffered under his rule. All of that is true. The neighboring chief was an authoritarian. He presided over economic collapse. Millions of his people fled the tribe. There is an open investigation at the International Justice Council for crimes against humanity. He deserved no protection. But here is the problem. The strongest tribe did not ask their own council for permission to launch this operation. They did not ask the Valley Council. They just did it. And the legal justification they used was that the neighboring chief had been indicted by the strongest tribe's own justice system on drug charges. The strongest tribe used their own laws as a reason to invade another tribe, take their leader, and declare they would run that tribe until further notice. If that is allowed to stand, it means any large tribe can indict the leader of a smaller neighboring tribe and then use military force to remove them. That is not law. That is power. And power without rules is just dominance. Let me throw in a quick aside here. There was a moment during the press conference where the strongest tribe's leader said his intel shaman told him that the neighboring tribe's opposition leader, a woman who won a Nobel Peace Prize for standing up to the authoritarian chief, did not have enough support to govern. So instead, the strongest tribe is working with people from the old regime, the same people who were part of the system that caused all the problems in the first place. They are keeping most of the corrupt structure in place and just swapping out the top guy. That is not liberation. That is a management change. And it makes it very clear this was never about helping the neighboring tribe's people. It was about control. Now, let me address the obvious pushback. Some of you are thinking, we had to do something. Drugs are destroying communities. Fentanyl is killing people every day. That is true. But if the goal was genuinely to stop drug trafficking, you would focus your resources on the routes and sources that actually matter. The strongest tribe's own data shows that the vast majority of fentanyl comes through a completely different border. Most cocaine comes from a different neighboring tribe. Venezuela accounts for a tiny fraction of the drug flow into the strongest tribe, and even within the Caribbean, most trafficking happens through other routes. So why dedicate an entire carrier strike group, over 10 warships, 13,000 personnel, and launch a full invasion of a tribe that is not even the main player in the drug trade? Because it was never about drugs. You think the confusion is the point, but actually the clarity is the danger. The strongest tribe is not hiding what they are doing. They are just wrapping it in language that makes people argue about the wrong thing. People are debating whether the neighboring chief deserved to be taken, whether the boats were carrying drugs, whether the strikes were legal. And while everyone is arguing about those questions, the strongest tribe is taking control of the largest oil reserves on the planet. They are setting a precedent that a powerful tribe can use its own legal system as justification to invade a smaller neighbor. They are showing that international rules do not apply if you have enough firepower. And they are doing it in a way that makes half the people cheer because the neighboring chief was bad, and half the people condemn it because it violates every principle of sovereignty. But both sides are missing the bigger picture. This is not about one chief. This is about resources and the willingness to use force to take them. Here is what this means for you personally. You might think this is just valley politics, tribes fighting over territory far away from your cave, but the precedent matters. When the strongest tribe in the valley shows that they can invade a neighbor, take their leader, and seize control of their resources without facing real consequences, it changes the rules for everyone. Other strong tribes will watch. They will learn. They will ask themselves what they can get away with. And the concept of borders, of sovereignty, of agreed upon rules becomes meaningless. It becomes purely about power. Whoever has the most weapons makes the rules. That is not a stable system. That is a system that leads to more conflict, more instability, more wars over resources. And when wars happen, regular people pay the price. Not the chiefs, not the warriors. Regular people. The ones trying to fish. The ones trying to keep the fire going. The ones who just want to make it through the winter without their cave getting blown up. Let me show you what happens next in the most likely scenario. The strongest tribe installs a new leader in the neighboring cave, someone who cooperates, someone who signs contracts that give the strongest tribe's companies access to the oil. The sanctions get lifted, the oil starts flowing again, but it does not flow to benefit the neighboring tribe's people. It flows to benefit the companies that come in to extract it. Those companies will take the majority of the profit. They will rebuild the infrastructure that collapsed under years of sanctions and mismanagement. And they will do it in a way that ensures they get paid back first. The neighboring tribes' people, who have suffered for decades, will see some improvement, but they will not see the full value of their resources. They will see enough to keep them quiet, enough to prevent uprising, but not enough to make them truly prosperous. And the strongest tribe will have secured access to $15 trillion worth of oil that they can influence, control, and profit from for generations. That was always the goal. Let me give you 3 things to actually pay attention to going forward. First, watch which companies get contracts in the neighboring territory. The strongest tribe's leader already named specific companies during his press conference. Oil service companies, refiners, producers. When those contracts get signed, look at the terms. Look at how much revenue stays in the neighboring tribe versus how much flows out. That will tell you whether this was about helping the neighboring tribe's people or extracting their resources. Second, watch what happens to the neighboring tribe's opposition leader, the one who actually won the election, the one the people chose, the one with the Nobel Peace Prize. If she gets sidelined in favor of someone from the old regime, someone the strongest tribe can control, that tells you everything about the real goal. It was never about democracy. It was about compliance. Third, watch how other tribes react. If this operation succeeds without serious consequences, other powerful tribes will take note. They will look at their own neighbors, they will identify resources they want, and they will start building their own justifications. The valley becomes less stable, more dangerous, and the concept of rules stops mattering. That affects everyone, including you. Nature does not care about press releases. Nature does not care about justifications. Nature just counts resources and power. And right now, the strongest tribe just took control of the biggest oil reserve in the valley by wrapping an invasion in the language of law enforcement. They sold it as stopping drugs. But the drugs were never the point. The point was always the oil, 300 billion barrels of it. And they got it. The fire in the neighboring cave is still burning, but it is a different tribe tending it now. This is a simplified cave story to explain what just happened in Venezuela.